Hey guys, what's up? How's it going? I'm gonna give it a couple seconds for some people to get in here. Mainly, I'm just getting ready to, oh shoot, I'm on the wrong screen right now. Just a second, let's see. I want screen 4. Okay, do you guys see the Litecoin chart right now? Very early days of Litecoin Coinbase chart. Hold up, I can't see the comments. Give me a second. All right, so Litecoin chart's fine right there. Let me go ahead and get this recording and we'll get started. So what we're going to talk about today is we're going to do 4 separate videos for 4 different coins. I'm going to talk about 2 different topics on each of these coins. First off, I'm going to talk about how holders could have protected themselves. Second off, I'm going to talk about the current technical analysis for each one of these coins. Okay. So last year, we were obviously in an extremely bullish market. Basically, I'm going to also show you what I do and how I do my technical analysis. So say the first day that Litecoin really perked up, say it went from $4 to $10 in one day, right? It's about a 250% gain. This was the first pop in volume that it has on this Coinbase chart. So I'm going to go ahead and mark the high of day on that day. That will be an important pivot in the future. Now the volume exceeded the volume on this day. So I'm going to go ahead and mark the high of day on that day. And that is going to be an important pivot in the future. So then we've got these 2 days that had even higher volume than prior as the run continues. We're going to mark the high of day of those 2 days. And that's going to be an important pivot in the future. See how this works? Like I'm basing it just off of this day, and you can already see just in the future, the price action, the algorithms basically pick up on that, and our human psychology is going to pick up on that. A lot of guys would have bought right at the top here thinking that this was going to the moon. So when it gets back to that price, it's just natural psychology for these traders to sell when they're not at a loss anymore. All right, so now we're starting to develop some type of uptrend. We're going to go ahead and mark what uptrend we have from very early on. You see that even back then, crypto was following technical analysis very well. So if I am basically holding Litecoin, what I'm waiting for is I'm going to wait for this uptrend to break. Once this uptrend breaks, then that is when I'm going to sell. If you have TradingView, it's as simple as, look, add an alert on this ray. You can have it send email to SMS. You can have it text you the second that any price touches that. So there you go. We have an alert set. We're going to go ahead and sell the second that this trend breaks. If we get a bounce right off that trend, that would be a great spot for us to add if our goal is to accumulate and hold longer term. All right, so say you basically invested, you're riding up this uptrend, you sell once it breaks here. That makes sense. Now we're going to go ahead and wait for the next uptrend to establish itself. You go ahead and draw this as an uptrend. Now the volume peaked on this day here, so we're going to go ahead and mark this as, oops, here we go. We're going to go ahead and mark the high of this candle. See how that was an interesting pivot in the future. Again, we got a nice volume spike here. I'm going to mark the high of day this day as a pivot for the future. Now I've got this trend here. Go ahead and mark that, see what happens with that. Now we're starting to kind of get parabolic off of this $49 support. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and try to find some type of trend that I can follow, just to help me ride the wave up, basically. Okay, so I got this right here. Now this was really when Litecoin started to get extended once it broke over this $100 range. We'll go ahead and mark, when there's long wicks on these candles, I also will go ahead and mark the closing price on these high volume days as well. So I'll go ahead and mark this 128 as a pivot. Go ahead and mark this 144 as a pivot. You see how that became an interesting figure in the future. Even on this crash day, we crashed right to this price, got that huge bounce right off of it. This was also a very high volume candle here, so I'll go ahead and mark the high of this candle. You see we stopped riding this uptrend right when we closed below here. Obviously, this is going to be an important figure here. This was our all-time high, and it was actually our all-time high for volume. I'll mark the high of day on that day and the closing price. The day before that was also an extremely high volume day, so I'm going to go ahead and mark the high of day on that price as well. So you can see just by going off of the volume, marking the high of day on these days, as well as the closing price, and trying to just establish an uptrend and riding these uptrends as long as you can. You can just set your stop losses below these uptrends. Or what I really like to do is I like to wait for a daily candle to actually close below this uptrend, so that if there's just some type of wick that goes through that trend and it bounces back up before the end of the day, I won't get necessarily stopped out. Let me see a close of the candle below the trend so that I know it's real, if that makes any sense. All right, so now let's go ahead and see how these trends came into play in the future. All right, so we had this nice trend here. You see, once this trend broke, basically that has, we've retested it several times. We've tried to reclaim it and failed, and we've continued to head lower. Same thing with this trend here. Once this trend broke, we tried to retest it, failed, headed down to our next pivot, failed that, tried to reclaim it, failed, headed down to this uptrend. You see what I'm saying? See what, you smell what I'm cooking? All right, so that's basically it for Litecoin. Now, the way I like to judge my entries, okay, so this is basically a map of how I would set my stop losses. The way I would judge my entries is I wait for some type of wedge, say like this right here. Once you get the nice breakout out of this wedge, that's when you buy. See the nice price action to follow. Then all of this, you're just going straight up. There's really no way you can judge this. All you can do is hold on and wait for the market to give you some reason to sell. So say as volume continues to increase, keep on marking these pivots And then once you break below one of these pivots, that is when you start to scale out, and then try to wait for the next pivot below for reentry. Now for Litecoin, really we have no established uptrend, which is not what I like to see. That certainly does not mean that we could not establish an uptrend. And actually I missed this high volume candle here. This is on my main chart. This high volume candle had a high of about $63. So we'll go ahead and mark that. And that's actually right about where we are at right now. See that? We closed right on this pivot. And then since then, we've bounced above. So if you're a Litecoin holder, I definitely wouldn't advise you to be freaking out just yet. If we start to close below this pivot and reject it, then we could certainly be headed towards this $49 range before we can establish another uptrend. Let's look at our current downtrends. Now, I'll do a video in the future about how I really judge where to put my uptrend or downtrend lines and where I put my pivots. Basically, it has to do with, I like to see either wicks right off of my trend lines or candles closing right on the trend line. Those two types of price action basically validate the trend. So I'm going to go ahead and mark an alert on LTC right here. Once it breaks above this trend, I'll go ahead and give it a try on a buy. But until then, I'm just going to kind of let it do its thing. You know what I mean? Anyways, all right, let's go ahead and go on to the next coin. Let's see, what did I have listed as the next one? Okay, LTC Neo was the next coin. Now, all right, I'm going to close my eyes and drag this way, way, way back. Oh, this is not Neo the crypto. Now, which one has more history, Neo USDT or all right, let's go with Neo BTC. One thing I like to do is I like to mark basically what the opening price was on the very first day it traded. I know sometimes these coins have been listed on several exchanges before they came to Binance, but I've noticed that the day they get listed on Binance, the open, the close, and the high of day or low of day price will become important figures in the future. So I go ahead and mark those every single time on every coin I'm doing technical analysis on. Okay, so on Neo, early days, you started to develop this nice uptrend. You bounce off of this uptrend and go into an even more parabolic uptrend. And the first close below that first uptrend is where I would go ahead and get out. I might take a stab once we bounce off this uptrend, and obviously that would have failed miserably, and you would have to cut your loss in that type of a situation. But if you were buying down here, holding and waiting for an uptrend to break, all you're doing is giving back a little bit more profit. It's a lot better than holding this all the way back down to here, if that makes any sense. Now, the high volume days on this, highest 2 volume days would be right here. So I'm going to go ahead and mark the closing price of this. I'll mark the high of this. And I'll go ahead and mark this all-time high as well. I guess at this point it's all-time high. I haven't looked at the rest of the chart, so I'm not sure if that is all-time high in the future. Now to judge new entries, go ahead. I like to really wait for, say, before I just go ahead and buy a breakout on the first break of a downtrend. I like to wait for it to break the downtrend once, draw my line based off of that break of downtrend. And then now this is the line that I'm actually going to trade based off of. So the first time I do not make the trade. Once it breaks above this line, I'll go ahead and adjust my line to that high. And when it breaks it now, that is when I will make my trade. Go ahead and mark we'll go ahead and mark the low of this red day. We'll mark the closing price of this red day as well. All right, so all of this is kind of relatively low volume, so I'm not going to go ahead and mark any specific pivots for that. Now I'm going to mark a new downtrend here. Like I said, I like to wait for not just the first break of a downtrend. I like to wait for it to break once and then mark my downtrend and then wait for that to break. So this is where that would be. Your first close above this trend is right here. Also in confluence, when you break above the high of day on its first traded day on Binance, which is that 37.64 sat range. Now you see we're starting to really go parabolic. Go ahead and mark a couple uptrends. So there you go there. Sometimes, especially in crypto, you'll get faked out on some of these downtrends. You might jump out. In this case, with this uptrend and this pivot being so close together, I would wait to see if you really closed and held below this pivot here before I cut it. And then you see you reclaimed it, tested this pivot, and then once you break down again and start dropping these pivots, it's time to go ahead and wait for better entry. Basically, you're going to wait for another trend break. We're going to have this right here. And you see we've been riding, we haven't even retested this line the whole way down. If we cut this wick off, and go to here, you see basically once you get this, once you enter into a bearish market, any breakout tends to get sold off. So you see a lot more false breakouts along these trend lines. Anyways, I'm going to go ahead and add an alert on NEO right here if we do break above this trend. And that would be NEO. NEO right now, it's not looking too hot. Just now starting to close below this 37.64 pivot. Definitely not a good sign. NEO is one of the weaker coins in the market right now. Now, however, you do get a couple of these wicks down here in the 33.72, so you kind of want to keep an eye on that as well. You kind of got this nice support zone Where's this at? Here we go. And I would basically mark this as my buy zone. Maybe stretch it up a little bit if you want to wait for confirmation of breaking back above this pivot here. That would be my Neo TA. I'll go ahead and leave that up for a couple seconds if you guys want to take a screenshot or anything of that. Okay, so next we have ADA. Takes us back to October. I'm going to take a look at the Bittrex ADA also. Oop, that is the Bittrex. I meant take a look at the Binance also. I'm going to go ahead and go with Bittrex. Okay, so I've already got this one done, but I'll go ahead and explain basically what I base these off of. Okay, first off, let me add the high of day on this first day on Bittrex as well. Okay, so this was our all-time high volume candle here. If you mark the closing price and the high of day price here, you see we got a nice bounce right off of that level in March. And that is right where we bounced again here on August 3rd. Now, if ADA can hold this level and break above this downtrend, certainly it looks good. Now let's see, how could you have protected yourself if you were an ADA holder through these crashes? I'm going to go ahead and start at the low of this parabolic candle here. Look at that, you close below this trend here. You can go ahead and buy once you come back to one of these pivots. Get the retest of the trend. You tried to reclaim it, but once you couldn't reclaim it and sold back off, it's time to go ahead and hop back out. Now, all of this price action, there really was not a lot of volume on. So I think that if ADA starts to try to take back off, since there's not as much volume associated with these highs, that it's not going to struggle as much to start to stretch back towards that area. If that makes any sense. If you have tons of volume of trading going on at all-time highs, then that's going to be a situation where there's going to be a lot of bag holders in that area, and recovery is going to be much tougher. Okay, so what I'm watching for on ADA is if we can break above this trend line here. This is basically going to be our support zone. So I would be buying this somewhere in this region here. And if you wanted to buy early, certainly I would just go ahead and put a stop loss below this region. And I'm going to mark this as a thinner line since it's not based on as much volume. Just as like I call this a swing high or a pivot. Basically, a pivot is where the price action drastically changes directions. Okay, so there is ADA. If you guys want to go ahead and take a screenshot of that or anything, I'll leave that up for just a couple seconds. Now again, once this trend breaks, you go ahead and start my base from the same spot right to there. And we just have had a hard time with any distinguishable uptrend at all besides from the very early days. This is still intact here. All right, next we're going to go ahead with ONT. All right, we're going to mark the close of the opening day. We will also mark the high of the opening day. And we'll go ahead and mark the low as well. Now, we've got this little uptrend here. We bounced off of this uptrend and formed a little bit steeper of an uptrend. Now, every time you bounce off of one of these uptrends, you're basically getting more and more and more into a danger zone the more parabolic you start to rise. As you guys have obviously seen with the way this year has played out so far. Okay, now we've got this swing high right here, or I guess you could call this a pivot, since the price did pivot from this point and change directions to the downside. Also, we can go ahead and mark this all-time high. And we'll go ahead and mark, instead of marking all the way up here, because we got a clear rejection of the closing price of this green candle on the following 2 days, then I'm going to go ahead and mark the close rather than the high. And this would be my technical analysis for ONT. This is one where we don't have any remaining uptrend intact. Again, that does not mean that we won't ever establish a new uptrend. There's just certainly no uptrend that I could hold this based off of it to try to ride the wave. And again, volume has pretty much died off on this coin. And one thing about technical analysis is technical analysis works when traders are watching the chart. But if there's no volume and there's no traders, then it doesn't matter, because there's nobody to trade that price action. And once these coins cannot catch a bid, then it doesn't necessarily, they can basically free fall. If there's no buyers on the bid, then because just all volume has completely died out, then as bag holders decide to finally sell and give up on it, then you just get this slow bleeding, just grinding lower and lower and lower. Now for ONT, go ahead and mark this swing high here. This could basically be our next attempt, next stab at a trade off of ONT. or I'll set an alert on this downtrend here. We break above this downtrend, I'll be interested in buying. But until we break above this downtrend, there's just not really any good reason for me to buy this. So this is the ONT chart. I'll go ahead and leave this up for a second if you guys want to take a screenshot. Now XRP is next. XRP is actually one of my favorite charts in all of crypto right now. I was the guy that was just getting into crypto when I saw XRP break above 30 cents. Now I kind of have a background in trading from the stock market, so I didn't FOMO into XRP. I didn't chase it. It went on that huge monster run without me as I watched it from the sidelines. So let's go ahead and pull it up and break it down. And actually, I'm going to use XRP USDT since I am using Bittrex. And okay, so the high of day on this very first day, you see we rejected that level very clearly several times. Once we broke above this 31-cent level is when we really shot off to the races. So when this happened, I told myself, I am going to buy this on a retest to 31 cents. Well, I've been waiting for a very long time. It's been, what, 8-9 months? But I finally did get my opportunity just the other day, made for a nice little 10% trade. Nothing like what the people made on this monster run here. That's okay, because if I got caught holding the bag, as so many did, then that's just a situation I try to protect myself from. We're going to head and mark the high of these high volume candles here. We will mark the closing price since we get that nice reaction directly off of that closing price, both on this pullback here and on this pullback here. Mark the low, the close, and the high of day on this day. Which also lines up pretty closely to the close on the day where XRP did stretch and make all-time highs. And right there. So now leading to where we are now, you see we just finally are settling back down on this pivot. A lot of these altcoins look like they are starting to reach bottoms. Anything below these points, these could serve as just insane resistances, and we could go into a longer term bearish market on many of these coins. I'm going to go ahead and set an alert on this right here on XRP. Okay, so XRP, how could we have really protected ourselves while allowing ourselves to ride the wave? You've got this nice little uptrend that was established here. You bounced off of it once, came back down, closed below, and broke below this $1.61 pivot. That is where you all should have been cutting your bags, in my opinion anyways. And that's really the only uptrend that you could draw this right here. This, of course, failed right away. It didn't even, you didn't even really try to get much of a bounce off of it, as the market had already started to turn bearish by this late January, early February. And this is what institutional guys are doing. They're just riding these ascending supports. Anyways, I hope this helps you guys to understand exactly how I do my technical analysis and to see exactly how the market does react to technical analysis. Of course, it's not perfect. You don't just break above a line and no matter what, it's a perfect buy every single time. There are false breakouts. There are false breakdowns. You're going to get stopped out and then the coin's going to take off higher sometimes. Sometimes you're going to buy what you think is a sure breakout and you're going to get faked out. That's just the way the market goes. Anyways, thank you guys for watching. I hope this was really able to help somebody out there. But until next time, this is Josh with the Kings of Crypto, checking out.